If you've been doing PE for a few weeks and feel like quitting, that might paradoxically be the best sign that you're close to results. You start with enthusiasm. First few days, maybe a week, you feel like this makes sense. You're consistent. You stick to your routine for a few weeks. And then you look at the measurements, and there are no hard results. Nothing spectacular. Maybe something minimal. Maybe even nothing. And that's when the thought appears, this probably doesn't work. But here's the thing most people don't understand. This is not an error in your training. This is a predictable psychological reaction. Psychology knows very well the moment when people give up on long-term actions. And this applies to dieting, gym, learning, and exactly the same to PE. In this video, I'll show you 4 specific mechanisms, each confirmed by research, without motivational narrative, without talking about willpower. Because the problem is not in you. The problem is in how we interpret a process that is inherently gradual. The first mechanism is called motivation decay. The decline of motivation. B.J. Fogg, a researcher from the Behavior Design Lab at Stanford University, described this as the motivation wave. Wave of motivation. You start high, then you naturally drop. This is not your weakness. This is a predictable curve. Fogg and his team showed something crucial. Habits are not built through repetition. They are built through emotions. And emotions fade quickly. In experiments with hundreds of participants, a pattern was observed. People quit between the 3rd and 8th week. Not because the exercises stop working, because motivation drops faster than results appear. And now the most important part. Most people interpret this decline as proof that something doesn't work. Research shows this is a natural stage of the process. Motivation always drops before effects. Always. This applies to dieting, gym, learning languages, and exactly the same to PE. Because it's not about the specifics of the activity. It's about how the brain treats delayed rewards. Second mechanism, valley of disappointment. This is a concept popularized by James Clear in his book Atomic Habits, and it describes exactly this moment. High effort, zero visible feedback. Clear analyzed hundreds of behavioral studies and found a repeatable pattern. People expect linear progress. I do 10, I get 10. I do 20, I get 20. But reality works differently. In reality, you have a plateau. You do 10, 20, 30, and nothing. And then suddenly, a jump. This is called latent potential, hidden potential. Effects accumulate beneath the surface before they become visible. And here's the trap. Most people quit exactly in the valley, between the 3rd and 8th week, because novelty disappeared, routine exhausts, and the line on paper doesn't grow. This is not a matter of character or willpower. This is a statistically repeatable moment of resignation. Research shows that the highest dropout rate occurs exactly when the body starts building changes, but they are invisible to the eye. In the context of PE, tissue reacts, micro changes occur, but the ruler doesn't show it, and the brain says, this doesn't work. Third mechanism, expectation error. The brain wants jumps, but gets millimeters. Neuropsychological research shows something fascinating. The brain is exceptionally good at detecting sudden changes. Insight, Eureka, breakthrough. That's when an area called the anterior cingulate cortex activates. The brain literally rewards you for sudden jumps, but gradual processes, these are psychologically invisible. A study published in the Journal of Neuroscience showed that neuronal processing prefers sudden state transitions. The brain registers event boundaries, moments when something changes suddenly, and ignores slow, linear changes. In the context of PE, tissue adapts. Micro changes in cells occur daily. This is biologically real, but psychologically invisible. Because the brain doesn't see jumps, it only sees a flat line. And here's the problem. PE doesn't lose with biology. It loses with how the brain interprets progress. This is not a training failure. This is a conflict between the pace of body adaptation and the reward system in your head. Fourth mechanism, self-handicapping. Self-sabotage. This is the most insidious of all because it works subconsciously. And it sounds exactly like this. I'll take a break for a while. I'll come back later. Research from Harvard shows something disturbing. People unconsciously sabotage their own success exactly when they're close to an effect. Not because they're lazy, because they protect their ego. This is called the signaling theory of self-handicapping. If you try and it doesn't work, failure hurts. But if you give up just before the effect, you can say, well, yeah, but I didn't even really try. Experiments conducted on hundreds of participants showed something else. Self-handicapping increases just before success. Not at the beginning, not in the middle, exactly when something starts to work, because success carries responsibility. If it works, you have to admit it's possible, and that maybe for years you've been telling yourself a lie. Sometimes it's easier to decide that something doesn't work than to accept that it works and requires commitment. In the context of PE, I'll skip this week because of work stress, and 1 week becomes 2 become a break, and you break the routine exactly at the critical moment, when the body starts responding. Now, let's look at this together. 4 mechanisms, 1 moment. Motivation drops. You get the valley of disappointment. The brain doesn't see jumps, only a flat line. And at this moment, self-handicapping kicks in. These are not separate problems. This is one synchronized psychological process. And here's the thing most people don't understand. People don't quit because there are no effects. They quit exactly when the body starts building them, and the psyche stops rewarding them. Tissue adapts slowly, motivation drops quickly. The brain looks for jumps, doesn't find them, and activates a protective mechanism. This isn't for me. But the problem is not in PE. It's in the fact that nobody told you this moment would come. That this moment is normal. And that going through it is the only difference between those who see results and those who don't. This is not a matter of talent. This is a matter of knowledge. If you're now in the stage of doubt, this video was exactly about this moment. And it's worth knowing that it's not random. This is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. This is a sign that you're doing something long enough for your psyche to start testing whether you really want this effect. And if this material helped you understand what's happening in your process, leave a subscription. Because most of the content on this channel is exactly that. Understanding mechanisms instead of motivational speeches.